So today we will be talking about Utagawa Hiroshige. And an overview of today's lesson, I will be giving a brief biography of his life, some more details about ukiyo-e prints and landscape prints, and then do a deeper analysis of one of Utagawa's most famous works of art, the 53 Stations of the Tokaido. So to start, we have a brief biography, and here we have the memorial portrait of Utagawa done by Utagawa Kunisada. So Utagawa Hiroshige was born in 1797 in Edo, which is present-day Tokyo, Japan, by the name of Ando Tukutaro. His father was a samurai and a fire warden who protected the Edo castle, which you can see right here in this artwork. So they were of the samurai class, which you can see in this pyramid, and this allowed the family not to struggle economically. Sadly, at the age of 13, Utagawa lost both of his parents, and unfortunately, he was no stranger to death in his life. Later in life, his first wife and his son died too. Before his father's passing, his father passed his position of fire warden to Utagawa. So Utagawa took on this new role as a fire warden, but his everyday responsibilities in the role were pretty minimal, and he was still able to focus a lot on his art. So in 1811, only a year after the death of his mother and father, Utagawa joined the Utagawa Painting School led by Toyohiro Utagawa, where he trained in ukiyo-e, which is the art of making woodblock prints. So before Utagawa joined the school, really little is known about how he was taught to make art, but he did come into the school with a lot of talent and skills. And Toyohiro, his teacher, had a very refined style of his art himself. So this really let Hiroshige succeed in forming his own style and figuring out kind of what he wanted to do. So only a year after he joined the Utagawa Painting School in 1812, he took the artist name of Utagawa Hiroshige. So this was a pretty big accomplishment after only having 1 year of formal teaching in art to already have an artist's name. That was a pretty big deal. But he wasn't able to fully devote himself to his art until the age of 27 when he passed down his fire warden position to his cousin. And one thing to note is that ukiyo-e students have little biographical information about them. At the time that their works were really most appreciated, people didn't really care about their personal details of their life and were more focused just on their art. So most historians break up Utagawa's kind of artistic life into three time periods. So the first time period from 1811 to 1830 is when Utagawa focused on figure prints of women and soldiers and people. But he did not gain much popularity during this time. These prints that he made were not very good, and his competition was much better than him. Sadly, in 1828, his teacher Toyohiro died, and Utagawa actually did not take on the name of his teacher, which was customary for a pupil to do, but instead decided to turn from figure prints to what he was really interested in, which was the landscape. So then in from 1830 to 1844, we have his first landscape period. And during this time, he took a lot of inspiration from Hokusai, who was another famous ukiyo-e printmaker from this period. Though their styles are often compared, they are very distinguished from each other, and I will talk about that a little bit later. It was also during this time of his first landscape period that he produced the 53 Stations of the Tokaido, again, one of his most well-known works. So then we have his last period from 1844 to 1858, and this was his second landscape period. He did some more figure designs as well, and so he was trying out other types of prints than only focusing on the landscape. And these were really just not as good as his first landscape period. When he made art for other people and to please others, it was very mediocre. So in 1858, he died at the age of 62 from chlorea, and it is said that his dying words were, "Leaving my brush in Edo, I set forth on a new journey. Let me sightsee all the famous views in paradise." So even in his death, he was still focused and excited about the landscape that he would see wherever he was going. So that was it for the brief biography. And now I'm going to give you some more details about ukiyo-e prints. So, ukiyo-e is a style of Japanese woodblock print, and woodblock prints are produced pretty quickly and inexpensively, though many people are involved in their production. So, you have the artist that creates the design, the carver who used wood to carve the design, the printer who colored it, and then the publisher or bookseller who printed the actual print. And I have a video that I will show you um, after I finish the slides so that you guys can just see a little bit more of the process of printmaking since um, this little 8-step thing does not go very in depth into it. But ukiyo-e was originally a term associated with the Buddhist concept that the sensory world was fleeting. It was lasting for a very short time, it lacked in real value, so this was a pretty negative concept. But over time, that negative connotation went away from the word. But what is interesting is that melancholy feeling that was first associated with the word still underlies many ukiyo-e prints. The word ukiyo-e literally means floating world pictures, and these prints were first marketed at the merchant class, which was the lowest class in the society, if you remember from that pyramid. So way under samurai, the merchant class was the lowest class. But with the expansion and growth of the city of Edo, many people in this lower class could become economically sound, and to own a print kind of became a status symbol. It was said, though, that a print could be purchased for the price of a bowl of noodles in Japan. And these this new class that kind of emerged, um, the merchant class really wanted a pleasurable and carefree lifestyle, which relates to the sense of a floating world. They just wanted to enjoy life. And originally, these prints, it was really common to want in these prints famous actors. But as the artist developed out of this, as their subjects, people actually accepted the more spiritual works that the artist wanted to create. And this is kind of because ukiyo-e was the favorite art in Edo, unlike in Kyoto, which was the imperial capital where the emperor lived. That is where more traditional Chinese art was favored. So in Edo, people really liked the simplicity of design and the colors that were used in ukiyo-e prints. In the 18th century, actually, color was first introduced into ukiyo-e prints, and new colors like indigo were developed, which made it easier to depict things such as the sky in a landscape print. These prints also incorporated haikus or poems in their prints, which would oftentimes relate back to what the artist was trying to depict. So now I will show you a little bit of this YouTube video. Um, Obviously not watch the whole thing. So here you're going to be able to see this woman going through the process of making a print. So I hope that gave you more an idea of how these ukiyo-e prints are made. Now we will talk a little bit about landscape prints, and these are what Hiroshige was most famous for. So again, prints were carved into wood and stamped with ink, and they could be mass produced. And so Hiroshige's prints became popular collectibles. And I'm going to read you this quote that I found that says the Japanese as a race have tended to see nature not as objective reality, but as a subjective reflection of their own minds. So this perfectly encapsulates what Hiroshige saw when he saw nature. It was a subjective reflection of his own mind. So, yes, he saw nature as a vision of poetry. His paintings or his prints were similar to haikus. They had depth and scale of nature in such a small space, and they are described as romantic and evocative of moods. And at his very best, the mood always came first, and then the design. So, at the same time, his prints were both realistic and imaginative. So, he wasn't as much focused on accurate prints of what he was depicting as much as he wanted the emotion and the mood to really come forward. And it is said that his prints reached the heart of the common man because when you looked at his work, you really felt like you were experiencing what he experienced when he sketched whatever he was in front of and made this. So, in the two prints that you can see on the screen, one of them, he has rain in it, and the other one, you can see the moon. And these were really great achievements to represent when he depicted snow and mist, rain, fog, moonlight. Um, the sentimental melancholy of the loss of his parents really came through. And also, you can see in these two prints how evocative they are of emotion, romantic and poetic, and a poetry flowed from his brush. That is what people said about his work. And just finally, about his landscape prints, nature was his true teacher. He did the best when he didn't wasn't focused directly on depicting exactly what he saw, but let the mood and emotions that he felt capture him and go into his work. So now I want to talk a little bit about the comparison between Hiroshige and Hokusai. So one important thing to consider is that Hokusai was born in 1760, which was 37 years earlier than Hiroshige. So by the time Hiroshige kind of hit his peak, Hokusai had been around for a pretty long time. So Hokusai was known to depict himself or figures with aspects of himself in his prints. He wanted to control the landscape. He wanted the print to obey him, and he wanted to depict what he saw in front of him, whereas Hiroshige thought pretty differently from this. He again, he wanted to express the mood and emotions that he felt. He forgot himself while he was working and focused on what was in front of him. Um, and while Hokusai saw nature more of as an object, Hiroshige was inspired by the colors and the forms and the moods, and he found these all expressions of subjective human emotions. So really, another thing that people loved about Hiroshige's work were the colors that he used. And that is one of my favorite things as well, is not much in these two that I have on the screen, but a little later, the sunsets and the changing colors of the sky that he was able to depict are truly incredible. So yeah, the main thing to note is that Hiroshige was focused on the mood and the emotion, where Hokusai kind of saw just an objective view of nature. So now let's talk a little bit about Hiroshige's most famous work, The 53 Stations of the Tokaido. So the Tokaido was a highway between Kyoto and Edo. So Kyoto being the um, imperial city and Edo being the military capital. And this highway had 53 rest stops. And it was built to aid in the travel between Edo and Kyoto, but this was not a short journey. 300 miles were between these two cities. So during the time that Hiroshige created this, one traveled this highway by foot, and when traveling, um, you would see people of many different walks of life. You would see the beautiful sights, you could feel companionship in the people that you met, and this all cultivated in the romance that was found on the highway. And during this time, guidebooks and prints of the highway really increased in popularity. So in 1832, Hiroshige traveled to Tokaido for the very first time, and he traveled it accompanying the convoy that was escorting a gift from the shogun in Edo to the emperor in Kyoto. And why he was included in this journey is unknown. There's no written record of this journey that exists, so he was just along for the ride and he sketched everything that he saw. So the 53 stations of the Tokaido consist of 53 horizontal prints. And though the journey was completed in the summer, his prints show all of the seasons, which relates it back again to his imagination. Though he didn't see snow while he was traveling it, he could imagine what the mountains looked like in snow. And that's what he wanted to create again, along with like the mood and the emotion that he felt at times during this journey are reflected in the seasons that he chose to depict at different times. So also in these prints, um, we see the union of man and nature. So little figures are depicted many times, either trudging up a snowy mountaintop or in the rain or just resting on a bridge, taking in the sights of the sky. And he wanted to show that man cannot be controlled by nature. So as you looked at these prints all together, as the figures travel across one scene from another, it is the landscape and the nature that lasts after the figures leave. And this is why he thought depicting landscape was so important, is that that is the thing that lasts. That is what is in your mind of the memories of this place. And um, again, with what I said before about his imagination not so focusing on realistic scenes, you might not actually be able to see the sights that he depicts in these prints. He changed what he wanted to fit the mood that he wanted. So these were images that he was inspired by what he saw. Um, and again, he just let the emotion take him and depict what he felt. Unfortunately, today, cars and trucks cover the road as any other highway on this earth. So there's a lot of smoke, and in one man's journal of his visit to the highway not so long ago, he is quoted saying, "The stillness and beauty represented by Hiroshige is overtaken." So, not only back then were you maybe not able to see what Hiroshige depicted, but especially now in our world with all the technology, and the innovations that have been created, it is going to be hard to focus on the beauty of the Tokaido, which is unfortunate. So you're probably wondering what the 53 stations of the Tokaido looks like. And here is the first scene. So it starts off in Edo. So these are figures traveling with their baskets on their back. And so this is where he starts. This is number one out of the 53 prints. And then the next one, I just chose this one because, again, I've been talking a lot about his changing seasons. And um, at the time that he visited the Tokaido, it was the summer. So, no, he did not actually see snow on this part of the mountain, but this is what he created, and this is what he imagined. You can see, as I talked about before, some of ukiyo-e prints include haikus or poems, which is what is in the upper left corner of this print. And I really like how the vibrant yellow of the figure's little hats really comes across against the white landscape. And I also love just the little brush of pink and red peeking out over the mountains. Um, so yes, this was kind of a more snowy scene. And then this is the last scene. So the journey has ended. They have reached Kyoto, and the colors in this are really just beautiful. The way that they kind of melt into one another in the sky, the blue and the orange, and the red of the mountain contrasted by the green of the one right in front of it. And you have the dark blue water below that changes into a more of a white. And so this is how it ended. I just think it is very, very beautiful. And no wonder why this is one of the most well-known artworks in the world. It is incredible, his use of color, and I can't even imagine how you would feel looking if you could see all 53 prints all together, how you would feel looking from one scene to the next, feeling as if you were there, feeling as if you were on the journey with him from Edo to Kyoto. It must have been just amazing. So, just some things to remember as this presentation wraps up. If there's anything that you take away, remember that Hiroshige was a master of landscape prints. He focused on emotion and his color, and the mood is really what he wanted viewers to think about when they saw his prints. And again, as I've said many, many times, it's imagination, not necessarily reality. He wasn't focused on getting the exact details of everything that he saw, but he could imagine what the mountains looked like in snow or in rain or in sunlight or in moonlight. And this is really why he was a master of ukiyo-e prints. This is why he became so famous, and why people still love his prints today. So that was a little bit about Utagawa Hiroshige, and I hope you enjoyed.